Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, Michael Murphy returns to the show. Michael is an award-winning director and producer, a political activist, and president of the Coalition Against Geoengineering. As an independent reporter and community organizer, his work includes directing and co-producing the groundbreaking geoengineering documentaries, Why in the World Are They Spraying? And What in the World Are They Spraying? Each film has awakened millions to the environmental threats of the geoengineering programs. In tonight's discussion, Michael will talk to us about his new film, which he promises will take a very deep dive into the geoengineering agenda, which includes dispersal techniques, which Michael believes can lead to a class action lawsuit. Michael's initiative, as with most initiatives, requires funding, and in an effort to gather those funds, he is asking folks to please consider donating to his next film by heading over to his GoFundMe page called Michael J. Murphy's Next Film. This site is up and running as we speak, and the link is also included in the show notes below. To kick our conversation off, I asked Michael to give us an update since his last appearance on the show, and here is what he had to say.
We've been looking at this legislation in these climate meetings, in these climate summits. I know you and Max Bliss have been talking about them, but it's indicative of the time that we're in. And because of this, it's looking like geoengineers are moving aggressively to make what are now illegal programs legal. And again, they're pushing for global legislation. So it's very important for us to recognize the season that we're in and take effective action. Because of that, I am just starting a funding campaign today. It is on GoFundMe, and it's called Michael J. Murphy's Next Film. So Michael, middle initial letter J, Murphy's Next Film. And what that will do, it will provide the necessary funding for me to do a couple of projects, which I think are essential at getting these programs stopped. And but my past films have been largely informational, and that's a very important part of the equation. However, looking at the season that we're in, this next film will be both informational, but it will also be a call to action in a couple of areas. One of the call to action right now, I'm in talks with attorneys about implementing a class action lawsuit, and it will be based on what we are going to do with the funding that comes in. And out in the Pacific, outside of Hawaii, we're seeing these things that differ. An aerosol disbursement that's different from the typical chemtrails that we're seeing. So here on the mainland, typically we're seeing the planes back and forth, back and forth. Out in the Pacific, we're seeing these explosions. And a long time off a satellite, we were wondering what was going on, but taking our island hopper flights that we take to spread the message on other islands, we actually saw them dispersing these aerosols from a boat, and it was going high up into the troposphere or possibly even the stratosphere, but anyways, up into very high elevations, and turning in to your typical wispy type aerosol pattern. Because of that, we're sure that this is some type of geoengineering. So without going too public, we have a capture device. We're going to be going up documenting, by video, showing this aerosol being dispersed from a boat, and then we're going to collect it and see what comes up in the sample. My guess would be that it would be our typical aerosols that we're seeing, the aluminum, the barium, strontium, other geoengineering programs. Very important for conclusively proving that these types of programs are going on. And then once we have that proof, we can move forward with, again, this class action lawsuit. And then also effective action. So we're going to be working with the Global March Against Chemtrails and Geoengineering to get activists involved in our climate meetings. Because right now, we have climate meetings that are going on essentially almost every month. And in these meetings, they're talking about and they're putting together the blueprints to provide the necessary legislation to make these programs legal. And, with the exception of a couple of activists, and I really want to commend those activists who have been going, Deborah Whitman, Max Bliss, and a whole bunch of other people, just hats off and kudos to you for getting into these climate meetings. It's essential. We need to be there. We need to be talking, asking the right questions, and really educating our scientists who might not be aware of really what's going on in our skies. And so, again, I think that's very important. But, again, this third film, I have my running shoes on right now, and I have the GoFundMe, so please go to GoFundMe, Michael J. Murphy's Next Film, and that will provide a kickstart for me in terms of getting this necessary footage, doing the necessary projects, and then, boom, getting a funding campaign together, and then we're off to the races. And hopefully, my goal is to complete this film by the end of the year, actually by August, prior to what I call the dance in France, and that's going to be where they really try and put together this legislation, again, to make these programs legal and to create global governance and everything else. So time is short. I have the vision, and just need a little bit of support. So again, GoFundMe, Michael J. Murphy's next film, and within a couple of months you should see a lot of things being brought out into the public in terms of video, and bringing us one step closer. But I think the information, which is extremely important, I think that's one element. We have to go a couple of degrees deeper in terms of how we address this, and taking effective political and legal action, I think, is the next step. So that's what I'm taking.
Very good, Michael. Excellent. And, you mentioned the climate conference and Max Bliss. And, when I had the conversation with Max, one of the things that he had mentioned, and I think a lot of people are probably unaware of this, is that there are scientists that participate that really do not understand. And they don't have the perspective that the geoengineering activists can bring to the table. And I know when I spoke to Max, it took me by surprise, because I was figuring that everybody that was attending was on board with whatever the agenda is, and only to find out that that is not the case, that there is room to be able to persuade the scientists that are there that what's going on is not a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I look back into my work in nonprofits and in my other corporate roles, we were very compartmentalized. So, for instance, we had a specific duty that we were hired to do, to whether it was to provide data or to do community outreach, but it was in a very specific area in a very specific way. So there wasn't a lot of room for free thinking or critical thinking. We were hired to do a certain job. And I think that's largely what the majority of our scientific community is. And because they're so specialized, they have an enormous amount of information based on this little small component of the scientific issue that they're addressing. So those of us who have free reign, we're able to critically think and not be hired and thus limited by a monetary system or by a job. We have the ability to educate our scientific community. And according to Max, he said, it wouldn't take too many of us. He said a very small percentage can have a huge impact. And that's really how I see this. And, while it's important that we have critical mass, and we're very close to critical mass based on a recent study, and I believe Dr. David Keith, the geoengineer, was involved with that, it indicated that we had 8% global awareness of geoengineering. So that tells me we have 92% of the population that's not even aware of it. So there's a lot of people that we need to reach, but on the good hand, and I think we mentioned this in my last interview, but I keep on repeating it because it's essential. It's very important for us to understand this concept. Critical mass is the percentage of a society where it becomes likely that your issue will be known amongst the majority of society, if I said that correctly. So critical mass is 10%. So once you hit critical mass, that's our tipping point. And then it's the 100th monkey idea, where the issue will spread exponentially. So I think we either just hit it or we're right on the outside of it. I am confident that my third film, if provided the resources, which we will get enough resources, I'm confident that this will reach, exponentially more people than my last films. It's been estimated that we've reached, well over 10 million people with the first two films. And that seems like a lot of people, Mike, but, if you look at just the number of 10 million people, we really need to be humble based on that, because that is, 0.03% of the U.S. population. Okay, so that's a very small percentage of the U.S. population, but we're talking about global programs. So even reduce that percentage point dramatically, because we're talking about, the programs impacting over 7 billion people.
Yeah, 7 billion people, yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of the number of people that we've reached, it's really important to be humble right now and to be self-critical or self-analyzing to the point where we continually look at becoming more effective in terms of hitting that critical mass. So again, we have a lot of work to do. We've done a little bit of work, and thanks to, the activists who have been addressing this for, many of them for 10, even 15 years, they really had the grunt of the work. Not that it's going to be an easy job, but again, the dynamics are going to rapidly change, but we still have to be very precise in what we do and how we do it, where we put our support. And if we do that, we will see dramatic changes this year, and we have to, because, again, this year is a critical year. This is the year that we believe they're going to try and tie everything into in terms of creating these climate treaties.
Now, Michael, the film, just so the audience is clear, is the film that you're working on, is it a call to action, or is it who in the world is spraying, or is it a combination of both?
It's a combination of both, but based on our time frame, it's largely going to be a call to action. And I think providing enough information of who, I think we're going to have enough components necessary to take the legislative and both legal action. And bottom line, information is very important, but information alone is not going to stop this. So information with action is the key. That is my focus now. And again, I have a clear vision. So we're talking with attorneys right now. And I've been working behind the scenes legislatively in Maui with the Maui County Council for a couple of years now. So we've learned a couple of things. And what really needs to be done is this testing that we're talking about. I don't want to get too public about it until after we get the results back. There are a lot of reasons for that, because there are a lot of different variables that can happen during, certain tests. So we want to be able to get a full spectrum of results back before we can report this to the public and move forward with it. But I can tell you it's going to be critical for what we are going to achieve, and this is going to happen.
What does the testing entail, Michael? What exactly are you testing?
We're going to be testing not only trails, but the aerosol explosions that we see. So a lot of people use the term chemtrails, and that's definitely one of the many components of geoengineering, but there are other methods of these aerosols being dispersed. And what the issue has been in terms of, which has probably held us back a little bit, it's been the trails, because the plausible deniability by our members in Congress, our members in Senate, and a lot of scientists, they've simply told us that what we're seeing is condensation trails. And this is going to eliminate that argument, because we will have video evidence showing them dispersing these trails, or not these trails, but these aerosols from a boat, and then, capturing. Right, we're going to go right into the cloud, capture whatever they're dispersing. We're going to analyze this, test it, and if we find what we are very certain, 90% or if not more certain that we're going to find, again, this is going to change the entire dynamics of the movement, because it will then pull us out of this chemtrail-contrail argument into a provable, without question, a provable dialogue in terms of what's being put into our atmosphere. So this is the critical next move, and this will bring us to the next level, no question about it.
Now, these boats, if you can talk about it, because I know you don't want to let too much of this out of the bag right now, but are they nondescript? Are they military? Can you give us some insight into that?
We're not sure yet. We've only began to see them just flying, at very high elevations in our island flights. So they're definitely coming from the ocean, but it's been too small. So we're going to see how close we can get to these ships. There could be, some issues within air. There are a lot of unknowns within this test, and that's why, I don't want to talk about it too much, but it needs to be done. And is it a risky thing to do? Yeah, it's kind of risky, because, the cost is high in terms of getting a plane up there. And the results, although we speculate very strongly what we're going to find, who's to say, when they intercept our phone calls, they're not just going to spray, steam up there or something inert, something different than what they're doing every day. So, again, there are a lot of different variables, and some of our advisors on the project have worked in exposing a lot of other government programs. They said that's that's a likely component. So we're going to have to be very secretive in the way that we do this, and and hopefully take a number of samples. And once we get what we need, then we can shed the light that we absolutely need on this issue, again, eliminating the chemtrail-contrail argument, and move full speed ahead with a class action lawsuit. This is absolute proof in terms of what we're looking for.
Now, with the class action lawsuit, Michael, the attorneys, who do they believe they need to sue?
We haven't gotten that far yet. I've only began to start discussing. I just got back from the Conscious Life Expo in Los Angeles, and during that time I met some attorneys who were interested in this. They had spoken to me. We had collaborated a little bit. So we're just in the beginning of talks with this. But what's interesting is there are several different areas that you can go into. For instance, I know Joe Marmon started a lawsuit in the past. He looked into, I think it was the California Air Quality Resources Board for failing to report the contamination. So you can sue local agencies, you can sue military, and depending on what we find within our testing, we might have absolute proof in terms of ship numbers, and being able to report these back. And I think that's what's needed. So you can, for instance, go into, you can use geoengineering in one of the components, and I'm still investigating this, so I have a lot to learn. But I think there are a number of areas that you can sue, and we have 500 climate laws that are scheduled to go into effect. California is, quote-unquote, leading the nation in terms of reducing emissions, and that doesn't sound all that bad. I think everybody's in support of reducing pollution into our atmosphere, but that's not all that they're doing, and we have to be very conscious of this. This is not only about reducing emissions. This is a huge transfer of wealth. It's a huge transfer of our rights, and when they form global government, if we allow them to do this, it will be the complete erosion of our Constitution and the freedoms that we know and have come to love. And it's the very freedoms, as being a direct descendant of the people that drafted our Constitution, it's what my ancestors literally gave their lives for.
Right.
And that was the freedom in our country. And we see this quickly eroding away. Now, what's interesting, Mike, that I realize there's been a lot of argument that has entered into the chemtrail movement, whether the planet's warming or cooling, and that was a divisive issue that I think was brought in to tear us apart. And largely, I think it's been effective with that. This is where I stand with this issue. This is where I have always stood. Based on what we are aware of with geoengineering programs, it's literally impossible to get accurate readings, whether the planet's cooling or warming. So based on that, and based on our legislators who are moving forward and the scientific community, based on the fact that they're not even bringing geoengineering into the equation, it's fraudulent. It's a fraudulent equation, and there's no way, no possible way that they can get accurate readings with the amount of aerosols that they're putting into our sky on a daily basis. Of course, they want to do this, and again, it's a huge transfer of rights. It will fundamentally change, if we allow it to, the way that we live. And many people are aware of the smart meters that are being put on the outside of the house, and there are a number of issues with that in terms of human health. There's a lot of radiation use of radiation, but in terms of monitoring, talk about complete monitoring in the home. And this is a potential possibility that we're looking at based on the fact that these smart meters can monitor every appliance that you have in your home. First of all, they might outlaw certain appliances. So if you use a vacuum cleaner from 1970s, you might get fined. You might get a $40 fine. Let's say if you accidentally leave a light on, and I'm not for wasting energy, I live off-grid, most of the year in Hawaii. And I'm very conservative, and I believe in that. I don't need to use a lot of energy, but occasionally I leave a light on. Potentially, this is what we're looking at with the smart meters. You may have to pay a $100 fine if you accidentally leave a light on. It's going to be, if we allow it, we will live in a world that will be like walking on eggshells. And this oppressive government, they're going to be looking at everything we do, and if you make a mistake, boom, they're going to take money out of your account. And that's where they're heading. And that's a huge shift of power, and it's really the goal of the global governance or New World Order agenda. It's to, by Agenda 21, really force people off of their land, based on this global warming, which is a flawed, I don't think anybody can disagree with me, based on what we are aware of, the models are flawed. And based on that, we're looking at a huge transfer of wealth. And I think there's a class action lawsuit there when we conclusively prove that geoengineering has been going on during this whole time when they're coming up with these numbers that, supposedly appear to be warming. There's even speculation in that. We have ClimateGate. We have all of these questions, and the science is not settled, and the science cannot be settled until geoengineering is stopped. So, those are areas that I'm looking as well. I'm definitely open, to suggestions right now. If anybody has any legal expertise and can bring some support to the table, please do. This is a call for support, and it's also, call for support so that we can do a worldwide call for action. And I think, based on the numbers, Mike, of the last film, several million people have seen the films. If we put out, or if we at least have the structure of the class action lawsuit, then we can get millions of people on board. And I know there were some concerns about court costs, a bunch of other things in the past. However, those are virtually eliminated the more people that we get on board. And, we've significantly saw an increase in terms of viewership of our films and the attention that my films have gotten. So I think it's safe to assume within a couple of months we should have a couple of million people and perhaps that many people signing on. And bottom line is this: the more people, the more power we have, the more ability we have to affect not only the law, but also the legislation that they're planning on initiating. This is a call to action, and it's in the final hour, because what's going on right now, and I think Max Bliss spoke a little bit about they were trying to pass legislation that didn't pass, and I think it was largely due to the activism efforts of those who went into that climate meeting.
Yeah, it's the Berlin conference. Yeah, Max and I spoke about that. Yep, he said that it was a handful of them, 5 or 6, and they were able to squash it.
Yeah, so the Berlin Declaration, I think, is an inspiration to those of us who are in the movement that want to be effective in terms of creating change. However, it's also a wake-up call, just as to how close and how serious the geoengineers and the scientific community are at creating legislation. So this is our year, and we simply cannot stand by on the sidelines or only exchange information. Knowing about this issue is not enough. We now have to take legal and legislative action, and that's where our point of power will be. And that is what we must do, and that is what I'm doing.
Well, it's a giant step forward, Michael. It really is. I mean, it's a lot different than pointing to the sky, and not that that's not important in acknowledging what's going on, but taking the step that you're initiating here is a very bold step, and it could very well be that momentum that's going to get things going and hopefully get this this thing exposed.
Yeah, and it's at the last minute, because I've spoken enough, we've done enough radio shows, and again, knowing about this, being aware of it is important, but it's simply not enough. So we have to take it to the next level. I'm confident that I have the ability to bring this out to the public as I have in the past. So remember, please go to GoFundMe, Michael J. Murphy's next film. And this will provide enough funding for me to get a funding trailer and do our atmospheric project, which again I think is going to be a game changer in terms of the way that this is addressed by the scientific community and the political community as a whole. So it is absolutely a must.
And Michael, you had mentioned before that they talk about the global cooling, the global warming, and I agree with you. That's nothing more than a distraction. That's to go send people off and just argue and debate each other. And the thing that you brought in to that discussion, which I think is very, very important, is the fact that even while they're having that discussion, they never talk about the fact that they're spraying. They never talk about that. So it's a false argument right from the beginning, because they don't enter into, hey, we're already doing this. We're already geoengineering. This could very well have an effect, or it could be impacting that discussion if somebody wishes to have that discussion, but they never talk about it.
There's no question about it, and because of the failure to disclose, it's fraudulent. It's like purchasing a an automobile and the guy says, you know, your car's a little bit low on transmission fluid, all we have to do is add a little transmission fluid and it'll operate correctly. Well, you buy into that. You put your life savings into that vehicle. You drive away and the transmission drops out 3 blocks away. Why? Because, you know, he didn't disclose the true nature of the problem, or, you know, simply stated there was a problem when there was no problem at all, and you paid for repairs. That might even be a better example, paid for repairs of something that really wasn't a problem. And you know, I think that's where we're at. So based on that, based on the fact that geoengineering is not included in the models or even the discussion, it is the biggest fraudulent act, both scientific and politically. And of course, certain people make a heck of a lot of money and strip away and consolidate a heck of a lot of money based on this flawed argument. Yeah. So it's critical that we, you know, those of us who are aware of this, and we have to keep in mind, it's only 8% of us who are aware of geoengineering. So when scientists are selling this global warming to the politicians and the political community, to the world, they have 92% of the public who is not even aware that there's weather control, weather manipulation. So it's highly likely that they'll buy into the changing weather dynamics in terms of being a cause of global warming, or, you know, the past melting of the Arctic ice. And I think it's important. I just wrote an article, Mike, and it was called Geoengineering and the Deliberate Melting of the Arctic. And I'm aware that there's debate whether the Arctic has melted or has not melted. However, you know, there's a mountain of evidence that clearly shows that they have melted in the past, and it goes back to a scientist named Stephen Schneider. And Schneider was on the IPCC. He's been a presidential advisor from everybody to Nixon all the way up to Obama. Had one of those weird scientific deaths back in 2012. Lost his life, and I'm not sure what the dynamics were. But if we go back to the 70s and we look at this guy Schneider, we really begin to see what the agenda was. And what Schneider had said in the 70s, he said, oh my God, we're going into an ice age. And he said, we have all this ice growth in the Arctic. We have to melt it. We have to do a couple of things. Let's look at what we can do. So he proposed a couple of things, denied that they were doing it, but let's look at the proposals. One of them was spraying black soot over the Arctic. Now, the idea is that black soot absorbs sunlight, and it will create, obviously, warmer conditions on that ice and thus melting the ice. I've got pictures of the Arctic and also documentation of geoengineering, which includes beyond what we talk about typically is the aluminum, the barium, but geoengineering using black soot. No question about it. They've been spraying that up there, melts the ice. He also proposed detonating nuclear bombs. Of course, those are very hot. They will melt the ice. Well, in my research, I found that 123 nuclear bombs had been detonated by Russia, and they say in peacetime, you know, for mapping and other things, but no question about it, that would melt the ice. And then chlorine. Putting chlorine into our atmosphere will destroy the ozone layer. No question about it. We now have a huge hole in our ozone above the Arctic. Of course, that makes the sun a lot more strong in that region. And then we have this polar vortex. So it appears that some of the ice may have been coming back. But if we look at what's going on, and we can relate it to this winter, the jet stream that should be coming into California is being diverted up into the Arctic. Meteorologists are scratching their head going, wow, you know, it really looks like an unnatural polar vortex here. We've never seen this before. Of course, probably many of them unaware of geoengineering. Some of them might be. They might be too scared to talk about it. But anyways, so all of this warm air and weather that should be coming into California is being diverted up into the Arctic region, warming it. Of course, that jet stream makes its rebound, a natural rebound, so it's bringing all of this very cold weather into the Midwest and, of course, the East Coast, where, you know, you're experiencing these sub-zero temperatures. This is my first winter in several years in Chicago. I'm not happy about it just from that standpoint, but there are a lot of corporations that benefit from this. Of course, we have California being droughted out. California is leading the nation in terms of bringing about Agenda 21 related policies. Some of those policies are curbing emissions. Others are the privatization of our water. So when you have drought conditions, companies like Bechtel owns 82% of the world's privatized water. They go in with public-private partnerships, form these alliances, and remove our rights to the water. So you can't do that unless there are drought conditions and unless you're in a critical area. So I think they're gaining in that manner. And again, I think that polar vortex is being created to warm the Arctic up, because if more ice comes back and it's conclusive that we're in a cooling period, which I think we might be in a cooling period, they are not going to be able to pass legislation that they have been priming the public for, spending billions, if not more than that, in terms of propaganda to get the public to buy into this. So time is very short, and it looks like, again, they're trying to pass this legislation before people become aware of it. Of course, it's creating, havoc all over the northern 50 states, here in the U.S., and anyways, that's honestly what I believe it is. So it's our job, based on that information that we have, to really bang the drum, let people know global warming, or should I say climate change. Climate change is largely, if not all, geoengineering. And once people realize that, and that's what my film is going to focus on, once they get that, they're going to stand up against this oppressive system and call fraud. And when fraud is out on the table, they will not be able to pass this legislation. So I think, again, time is short, but it's very important. I'm very excited about this, so I see it as, almost like not a Hail Mary, but, a last, it's the last play in the game. And I'm confident that we can achieve this.
Michael, you talk about rerouting the weather, and before we got started here, I mentioned to you, I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, and today and tomorrow, as an example, we're going to have temperatures during the day that's going to be in the low to mid-20s, and then tonight we're talking about 0 degrees, and then on Sunday it's supposed to pop up to around 60 degrees. So this is not normal weather. And for those that are listening, what you need to do is just pay a little bit more attention to the temperature swings. And if you're old enough, and as old as I am, you can think back and think to yourself, was the weather like this 10 years ago, 20 years ago? I mean, I can tell you that I've been down in Raleigh now for 20 years. I've never seen this, ever, these types of swings. And I don't think I've ever had temperatures in Raleigh where it was 0 degrees at night.
Yeah, and the important thing as well, I agree with you 100%. We've always had adverse weather conditions, not in this frequency, and we haven't had the jet stream diverted in an artificial manner. And I have not looked at the weather map today or for the past week, or 2 weeks, for that being. My guess would be, right now, if we see the pattern of the jet stream, and I'm going to get a date for people, if it's February 19th. So my guess is, again, you would see this high pressure above California, which is pushing that jet stream up into the Arctic region, and then the jet stream is rebounding back, and I think hitting people in the Carolinas with that Arctic air. And again, I think it's an agenda to keep that ice from really coming back the way that it may want to. And again, this whole model, all of these models within global warming are flawed because they're not including the big elephant in the room that 8 or 9% of us are aware of. And again, that's chemtrails, geoengineering, weather control programs.
And the other thing, they throw the word around anthropogenic, which means that it's originating from human activity, that humans are the reason why the weather is doing what it's doing. And the other fraudulent aspect of this is the fact that humans are not contributing to this, that the only humans, if you want to point to humans that are responsible for what's going on, are those that are involved in these programs, these geoengineering programs. It's not the masses, it's not the world population.
Or certainly not in the degree that they're saying. I don't believe that CO2 right. Is the poison that they're saying. However, to achieve the political goals, I mean, world government has been an agenda for over a century now, and finally they have the technology to pull it together. So what as the Club of Rome said, we're looking for a common enemy to unite us, and using global warming and other things, we found the common enemy would be humanity itself.
Exactly.
And Therefore, you limit humanity, and you have, in order to limit, now that we have, quote-unquote, the supposed global problem, you create global governance, consolidating all of this monetary and political power into the hands of a few. And, there's it's a lot more easily to control the masses, and of course that's been a stated agenda. So if you look at the agendas that have been spoken about, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, Ted Turner, all of these people that have population reduction agendas, they have global governance, and all of these people are working together very effectively to bring about these political changes. This falls right in line with what their goals are. And right there, anytime you see that I think you have to start asking questions, okay? Something's wrong, because these people who are not in support of humanity, in support of life and the things that we value, which would be, love, family, life, nature, and all of these things, well, they've been running the corporate system for, a couple hundred years, and look what's happened. We have all of these social problems. We have all of this chaos, and it's all appears to be sort of part of the agenda in bringing about these political and corporate objectives, to fruition. So we should start asking questions, and then you don't have to look too far to find the sources of our adverse weather conditions, to find the source of the past Arctic melting. It's all there in writing, and it doesn't take too much research to really question and find out what's going on. And because of that, they cannot pass legislation. However, it's our job to make the public aware, and an aware public, a conscious public who has the ability and will be willing to write their members of Congress, their Senate. Man, if we have millions of people, that will absolutely create a huge impact on what we're trying to accomplish. And a film with a call to action, and this is going to be an action. It's going to be a call to action film. And again, the goal is to get this out by October, so we have a couple of months before the end of 2015, and I'm confident that we can achieve our goals.
It's interesting. A lot of people believe that their representatives are all in on the conspiracy. They're just running cover for these programs. And what I try to explain to folks, and I don't know whether you agree with this, Michael, this is just my perspective, but many of our representatives, or those that are supposed to represent us, they're clueless. They don't know anything about these programs. Many of them, in my view, are in that 92% we spoke about before, that just, they're unaware.
I would have to agree with you 100%, or largely. And that's what we found. We expect our legislators to be aware and conscious of everything. Bottom line is this: these guys are probably watching the nightly news.
Right.
They're no different than your average, neighbor down the street. And, in terms of awareness or consciousness. So it's our job to connect with these people, I think, in an effective manner, to develop relationships. We're very effective in Hawaii with doing this with the the Maui County Council, developed relationships, had backdoor meetings in terms of addressing legislation. What do you know? We're in the process of writing a law because of this. We didn't go in there yelling at them, telling them how terrible, they are, because they're unaware of this. And I've seen that, largely that backfires. Hate is not something that I think is an effective tool in terms of going in with this. So we have to go in, develop those relationships, with love, with the right spirit, and that will do amazing things. And once you develop that relationship, then we earn the right to talk to other people, and we earn the right to talk into their lives. But if somebody calls me up, and trust me, Mike, I've gotten plenty of these phone calls, especially, it was amazing after the first film, it ruffled a lot of feathers, and it contradicted a lot of people's belief systems. So I was getting phone calls every day of people swearing at me, and all of this, and I'm like, let's see. I have, 50 calls to take. Who am I going to listen to? Is it going to be the guy that's attacking me, or is it going to be somebody that says, hey, I want to go out and have coffee. I really, I'm not sure if I'm on the same page as you, but I'm willing to listen.
He wants to have a civil conversation, yeah.
There you go. And it's no different with our legislators. So the way that we address this is equally it's important. Not to say there is a time for battle, and there is a time for street protests. And I'm definitely will put get the bullhorn out. I do that occasionally. There's definitely a time for that, but not in your initial stages of talking, and it's at a last-ditch effort. And I think we're coming into a time where I was just speaking with Greg Pollan, who organized the Atlanta protest, which I think was very good. We're working closely with the Global March Against Chemtrails and Geoengineering, Bye Blue Sky, this new formation of activists who are just doing amazing things. And he was talking about the importance of getting out there in the street and all of the resistance. He got a lot of resistance, a lot of people trying to discourage him from doing that. And I said, I think you're on the right track. So I think we're at the point where we need to have the backdoor meetings, but also, have activists who are willing to hit the streets, go out, and get some visibility rather than on Facebook and all of those other internet avenues, which I think, by the way, are important because they're very important with this information exchange. However, the establishment, those who are, again, trying to pass legislation, they've taken this to a whole new level, and they have a time frame. And based on that time frame, we have to change our activism accordingly. And when we do that, that's when we're going to see mountains moved.
Absolutely. Now, Michael, you had mentioned before about the 500 climate laws. Did you want to talk about that a little bit? Because some of the audience may be completely unaware of what's going on in 2015.
Sure. In 2015, there are 500 climate laws scheduled to go into effect. They're UN climate laws. 66 nations have signed on to this. And there's so much in writing of these climate laws, but I've looked over a couple of them and had some people brief me on these, and they look good. They look, about reducing pollution, things that I think a lot of people would be supportive of. However, a lot of people aren't aware of the broader political agenda. And we have President Obama now has a climate task force, or I believe it's called a climate change re-education committee. And this is a committee of about 12 or 15 mayors and governors of various states, and what their role is to go out into the local municipalities to essentially sell them on buying into these climate laws. And if we look at the structure of the U.S., county has more authority than the state more than the federal government. Well, what they're trying to do is bypass this. And when a global body or governing body gets its tentacles, for lack of a better word, into laws and legislations, what they do is strip away the sovereignty of that county, of that state, and even of that country. So they come in with these, like a Trojan horse, with these really good-looking laws that, again, most people would be supportive of. And once they get their hooks in there, that's when they can come in with the oppressive, more transfers of wealth and things that would not be favorable to most of the citizens in that area. So I think if we allow this to happen, if we turn our other cheek, or just, simply continue to exchange information, and if we fail to, which we're not going to take this to the next level, I think there will come a time, or they're at least planning for a time, where our members of Congress and Senate would say, you know what, this is out of my jurisdiction. This is a UN law. So, who do we go to then? I don't know, and that's how critical it is. So we have to, again, I keep on beating this drum. I will say it 1,000 times if I have to. Now is the time to take more aggressive action, and the appropriate action, and we're there.
Yeah, you just explained Agenda 21. That's exactly how Agenda 21 rolls out their program.
Of course, Agenda 21 has been part of the 21st century agenda. This has been something that, essentially Bill Clinton started talking about, and really, I think, was instrumental in bringing it to fruition. Here, a couple decades later, we're looking at, some very concerning things in terms of our rights, our freedoms, land, our very property, how natural resources are dealt with. And we spoke about rain. That's just one of the many different components of this, of privatizing rain. So, people, there's been some laws passed where people don't have a right to puddles out in their backyard. That's supposedly federal government, and that's what they do. So they slowly take away people's rights or take away people's land and resources. And this is something that, if it's a 40-year process, little by little, as Hitler said, take away people's rights very slowly. And over time, before they realize it, that they're really being bamboozled, it's going to be too late, and they won't be able to reverse it. And we're not there yet. We're not.
We're not there.
Close.
Yeah.
But we're not there.
Yeah, they do it incrementally. It's by stealth. And what I try to explain to folks, Michael, when I have conversations with them, and mostly in the realm of Agenda 21, is the fact that what's going on is they're going to pass codes, ordinances, statutes, regulations, and so on. And every time they pass a code or an ordinance, what you have is less liberty and you have less sovereignty. And that's how it works. But it's very incremental so that the people don't wake up to it. You wake up 5 years from now and you say to yourself, gee, how'd it get like this? And that's how it works. And it's the same thing with the geoengineering. Very incremental. And then people are going to turn around 5, 10 years from now, and it's going to be a whole different ballgame for them.
Yeah, I believe so. If we were to allow it to happen, I'm a visionary, so I see amazing things happening, and I see an incredibly powerful movement of people rising up. And just in the past 8 months, people who have come into my life and who I've been working with, collectively we've been discussing ideas. It's just been amazing. So with that being said, I wake up in the morning, excited, saying, oh my God, look at the opportunity that we have today. Oh my God, they tried passing new climate laws. This is great, okay, because now it gives us something to really collaborate about. And and you know what, Mike, this issue is it's the most damaging programs on the planet, there's a beautiful component to that. And the reason is this, because it impacts every living thing on the planet. It's the first issue that we've ever had in the history of this planet that has the ability to bring us together collectively, to bring us together on a topic. And there's power within that. There's power within that. There's power within unity. So on the flip side of things, yes, it's a battle. Battles are never easy, and I've been through many in my life, and I'm sure I'll be through, plenty more for the entirety of my life. But you know what? The beautiful thing is the clearings that you have and the results. If you stand in truth and integrity within your battles and, look for the common good of mankind, all of these wonderful people come into your life, and you collectively work together at a common goal. And that common goal is getting geoengineering stopped. And that's a beautiful thing, to see humanity unite. And, you look at how many years, 100 years or 200 years of the establishment working to create the vision, within our lives and even within this movement. We've seen a ton, so much division attempting to come in, but it's not stopping those of us who are really focused on this in terms of coming together, and it's happening. And that's a beautiful thing. It's not easy. It's not easy, but it's an incredibly beautiful process. I'm grateful to be a part of it. I'm grateful to have been called, and grateful, just for you covering this issue, and you and the many other activists who have come into my life, in the past 8 months. God bless you.
Well, right back at you, Michael. You've done some fantastic work, and I had mentioned to you on the earlier shows, anytime you want to come back, anytime you have an update, you want to talk about this, you just give me a ring, and we'll get it out there, because I agree with you. This is probably the most important issue that we have out there.
I would have to say yes, and there are a lot of important issues out there. I would say this completely, takes the cake. So I encourage everyone to go to whyintheworldAreTheySpraying.com. We encourage everybody who has a DVD to make copies and hand out for free. But more importantly, we need funding. I need funding to get this project off and rolling. And that's what made both films prior to this move forward. It was the collective effort. So if you go to GoFundMe, and it's Michael J. Murphy's Next Film. That is the name of the campaign title. And let's support each other. Let's move forward. And we're going to get some information out as quickly as possible, as soon as I get some traveling funds and some other resources to get the planes up in the air.
Excellent. Excellent, Michael. And as far as the contacts and the logistics to get those folks out there to do the testing, is that something that's basically in the planning stages now, or are you beyond that?
Oh, I'm beyond that. We have capture devices. We have everything. All we're waiting for is funding to get the airplanes up. And okay. We're ready. The shoes are on. The running shoes are on, and I feel like I'm so ready to get up there and and get this out to the public. It's a project whose time has come.
Excellent work. Are there any closing thoughts, Michael, or anything else that you wanted to share with us before we head out here?
I just want to, I want to thank everybody who has addressed this issue in truth and integrity, and in terms of how we've come together, in sharing information. And really, God, there are billboards going up all over the country. Those things are very powerful in terms of bringing awareness and knowledge. Keep up your work, folks. Sometimes it seems like we're not making progress. No, I'll tell you, we are absolutely making progress. And each and every one of us involved in any capacity, we have a very important role, and no role is more important than the other. We have a very instrumental role. So whether your audience is 5 people or 5 million people, we have, I think, an equal responsibility. So please continue doing your work. We're so close to critical mass, and the dynamics will change by the end of the year. I can guarantee you that. If we continue pushing forward, we will have a completely different movement, and I believe an effective movement at bringing these programs to a halt and restoring our fragile planet. And it's time. I want fresh water. I want fresh air. I want clean food to eat, and I want that for humanity as well. So we have the ability to do that. Thank you, Mike.
You're very welcome, Michael. And if you want to come back in 30 days next month and just give us an update and let us know how it's going with the funding and the film, that would be great.
I definitely will. Thank you very much.
You're very, very welcome.
And that concludes my interview with Michael Murphy, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Michael's website can be found at www.whyintheworldaretheyspraying.com and at www.stopspraying.us. His GoFundMe site is called Michael J. Murphy's Next Film, and the site can be found by typing in www.gofundme.com/MRI4ES. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sageofquayradio.blogspot.com, or simply head over to our hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.